Welcome to Awareness to Action, where you'll discover how possibilities become reality with me, Joan Marlowe. Join me and my amazing guests for powerful stories about those world-shifting aha moments. You know, the ones that catapult you into action and transform the way you walk through the world. Yes, you can live your life with purpose and passion. Maybe you aren't there yet, and that's okay. This show will take you behind the scenes and walk you through how other people just like you were called to transform their lives and the journey they embarked on to get there. The first step to taking life-changing action, or any action at all, is awareness. Maybe that's why you're here. Join the movement to create and live your purpose and passion while embracing your authenticity. Awareness to Action starts now. Well, good morning and welcome to, excuse me, let me get rid of the frog in my throat, an uninvited guest. Good morning and welcome to Awareness to Action. I'm Joan Marlowe. And again, every time I hear that little intro, it just feeds my soul again, because we all have purpose and passion, and we need to find those purposes and passion. The other thing that we all have in each of us, I think, is to tell our story. And I don't know about you, but I know for decades, I've been told I have a book inside of me. I didn't know what the heck that thing looked like, but I was given an opportunity this summer to give it a whirl. And I was invited to join forces to create a collaborative book. And Becky Norwood, my guest today, was the leader of the pack. She showed us the way, she showed me the way. And again, I'm such a big observer that I was busy observing the ins and the outs and whatever else of what she was doing with us and how she had to herd these 45 cats also to meet deadlines and so on and so forth. She always did it with total grace and always the perfect word and the perfect temperament and the perfect attitude. And so she was the perfect person to then welcome to my show. And I was so excited when she said yes, because she has an amazing story to tell. And it falls in line with that aha moment that we look at saying, I need to leave what's behind, and I need to move forward. And the beauty of what Becky brings forward is the essence of stories and storytelling, and talking about it as being literally an art. And in some cases, it might actually be becoming a lost art. And we're going to be talking about that as well today. So a little bit about Becky, besides my take on who Becky is. Again, she is a #1 international best-selling author, speaker, and book publishing expert. And she is the CEO of her company called Spotlight Publishing, which now I'm a part of as well, and has brought over 300 authors. And I think when we last talked, I think that number has risen to 400. I'm remembering that it was a big number. So she's brought over 400 of us to #1 best-selling positions. And she is widely recognized for the empowering and intuitive way she guides others to weave storytelling into their books and marketing. And she incorporates her methods with sound marketing that is a pathway for business expansion and audience growth. And that was something else that was amazing. Everything she did was not about her and the beauty of this book. It was about us. How can we shine and how can we get our message across? Because each one of us is an individual. And that was something else that I just was in awe of completely. Becky believes that a well-told story is a gateway for growth, sharing, and a way to unite humanity. She's an advocate for the positive that comes from sharing our creative genius in impacting our world in positive ways. But of course, that's why she's here too, since everything that I try to touch relates to positivity and possibilities, and Becky certainly is the queen of that. So welcome, Becky, to my Awareness to Action show.
Beautiful introduction. Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. Wow. I think that's pretty cool.
So you're feeling pretty pumped? Okay.
Yeah, like, wow, I didn't
know. Okay, well, then that's a perfect way to get started. So tell us a little bit about who you are and from your perspective and your aha story, which is really so much of what this show is about.
My journey was very, I don't think unique to the world. From a very young, I had lived in an incredibly abusive situation. My dad was not a happy person, and he took his unhappiness out on his wife and his children, and in every form of abuse that you can imagine. And so, growing up in that kind of a world, um, as you become adult, you really don't know. You don't have a good framework of solid framework to begin life as an adult. So the first thing you do is attract the same kind of people into your lives. And so, from my earliest beginnings, it's been quite a journey. And I think the words as I heard all the time as a kid was, you're ugly, you're stupid, and you'll never make it in this world. And it was just a constant thing. And so as I went into adulthood, my first marriage lasted 3 years, but and I had 2 children during those 3 years. And as I slowly began to realize there had to be something more, and my heart kept telling me there was something bigger, something better. But it was quite a journey because the framework that I had was that it's okay for men to abuse you, and it's okay for all of these kind of things. And so it's been quite a journey. And what was fascinating to me, because I think in my heart of heart, and I think for a majority of people, if they come up in the world in that way, their heart still is pure and good. But they still know deep down there's something better, but we don't always know how to reach that. And my reaching came about in a time, it was gradual. There was a lot of things that I did to kind of get to that point. But at one point, I attended an event and I was looking into how to market online, how to keep businesses alive during rough times. And the economy was changing. I had lost a business simply because my clients were going under during the real hard economic times. And I came across a gentleman out of San Diego that was teaching, how can a small business stay and during difficult times and really excel. So I would travel from Phoenix to San Diego for his classes. And I was learning so much. But at one point, he started talking about the world of publishing and how we could do it, how a book could make a difference in the world. And he kind of showed how to do it. Of course, he had a huge following and made it sound like magic. But at that moment, I knew I was going to write my book. And what was interesting about that, I knew immediately what the title was, but getting myself to write that book was a whole different story. And so I knew, I wrote it down. In fact, they made paper book covers that go over the cover of another book. And mine was called The Woman I Love. And the whole story behind that is kind of sharing my story, but also sharing what I learned through that process of coming to heal and really to start to shine in the world. And it took me 4 or 5 years to do that, because it was it really was difficult to think that I was going to share this with the world, because I had kept it hidden away, during my adult years. And yet by the mere act of writing the story, it transformed my world, because it gave me a fresh perspective. It put things in place, but it also made me go deep inside to figure out what did I really want for this, and how did I want to start showing up in the world. So it's been amazing, truly amazing. And it's been quite a journey since then. And that's how I started on my road to publishing.
Wow. That story, and again, it's not the first time I've heard this story, and it still hits me in so many ways. And when you unpack that story and you think about all of the pieces and parts that are part of that story, but again, we are each unique, but we really aren't unique.
Yeah.
We all have the same working. I always talk about it, the blueprint that we have within us. And we look at how many outside forces impact us and the stories that we tell up here.
Those stories can be terribly noisy.
Terribly noisy. The crowd up here, terribly noisy. And again, even as years go by, you can still hear a word or hear a tone or whatever. And boy, that story starts running again, even though everything you've shared has to do with a road to healing. And each one of us, no one, and what I think I take out of there most importantly is the fact that we all have the ability to change, or to take a new view of ourselves and to take matters into our own hands, and to say that I can make a change. And then the ultimate piece is knowing that you aren't alone as you make a change, especially with writing. You can then share your words with others, because I think as we talked, Becky, you and I, when you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, you said that, and again, her book is, you're still available on Amazon for your book.
Yes.
Okay. And we'll include all that information in the show notes as well. But I think you would also share that it's not only women that you hear from, but you also hear from men in the world.
Yes. Yes. You know, and this is not to say that because I wrote my book, everything always is rosy, because there's always those triggers, like you just mentioned, the
Oh,
things that come in, but it also, it's how you choose, what you choose to do about those things, that helps you to keep picking up those pieces, because I have fallen numerous times, into, whether it's depression or sadness, or feeling less than, and never feeling quite as good as anybody else, and all those other things. And yet it's what you do to pick up the pieces. And one thing that transpired from writing that book was I had done everything this gentleman had taught in his classes, from starting to be very active on social media and talking about the story, and forming a Facebook group and a Facebook page, and different things where I felt like my audience was. And after I wrote that book, I had so many people I did not know that had picked up the book and read it and came back and said, thank you. Thank you for having the courage to write that. What that did for me on a personal level was made me absolutely certain that I hold no corner in the market for what I experienced, because there's so many others that have, it's very common, and it's we have a lot of choices to make when it comes to that, as to how we're going to rise above it. And some never are able to.
right.
It is just the way it is. But I found that by sharing the story, and storytelling is such a deep fiber of really the wholesomeness of our world. Because since the beginning of time, storytelling has been a way to teach and inspire and make a difference, and pave the way for the future, for those that come behind us, to learn a different way. And when I hear a story, when I work with authors now, when I first published that book, so many women came to me and said they've never told their story either. And so we did a series of books called We Choose to Thrive. And over 50 women in those two books shared their story for the first time. And what I've watched, and they each had a chapter, just much like Wisdom of the Silver Sisters. What I've seen from that is the growth of, many years later, I'm still seeing the growth of those women, the things they're doing into the world today, because they decided to stand up for themselves once and for all.
And that is so true. And again, in my lifetime as being a lifelong learner, forever teacher, as well as being a life coach, a life and wellness coach, and I believe in that whole process of conversation, even doing energy work. When you're talking about something, the trauma in our body does not want to stay in our body. It wants to go. So as you talk about things, the things in your body keep moving. So as you get energy work in that realm also, whether it be Reiki or Shiatsu or acupuncture, whatever, all of that trauma is going to be raised, because again, words are powerful. The thoughts are powerful that go with the words. And again, think about, as a little girl keeping a diary, and then as a young woman, and even today doing journaling. That is so vitally important. So thank you for sharing. And again, it all relates also to our vulnerability. and then learning that we aren't the only ones out there that are facing these issues and have chosen to get above it. But let's go to break. And when we come back from break, we're going to talk about, the main part here is talking about storytelling overall. And again, the title of this is The 4 Pillars of a Story Well Told. And that is powerful in and of itself as well. So we'll see in a minute. Well, welcome back to Awareness to Action. And today our moments of awareness relate to, again, telling our story, the story that we're living. So our awareness is our truth, and getting it out into the open. And I'm reading some other notes that I had from my conversations with Becky, et cetera. We're talking about sharing our stories with authenticity and vulnerability. And that's just who we are. Whenever we share these words, that's what we're doing. So, Becky was telling a little bit about her story and how she got started where she is. And, to sort of circle around, the book that I was a part of, and you were talking about a collaborative effort of women telling their stories. Well, our book is called Wisdom of the Silver Sisters. And what it is, it's all about, as the title implies, is about wisdom. So we're talking about, and again, Silver Sisters, we're talking about, maybe we aren't millennials. Maybe we're a little bit beyond millennials. Yeah, look at this. Yeah, here we are. But we're proud to have all this. We earned all these silver hairs and whatever. But this book, again, it's 45 women that offered to share their story. And again, it's all about providing that opportunity to keep the story going. And the hope against hope with that book is that folks will read it and share with their daughters and their granddaughters and whatever, as far as how to get these pieces and parts. Because again, you can think you're so unique and you're traveling a road that no one else has, but guess what? There are others out there that have done that as well. So Becky's Business Spotlight Publishing, and in her tagline, I noticed that this morning when I was pulling something up, it's the legacy of a well-told story. So we've got a bunch of words in there. We're talking about legacy, which is what I'm talking about with the Wisdom of the Silver Sisters, but legacy is going to come up in the conversation again, and it's all about a well-told story. So Becky, share a little bit about what makes for a well-told story, which I think incorporates these amazing 4 pillars, which, I love process. And this is all about a process and a step-by-step. And you're going to be getting many, many, many operational definitions of what these things are. And for you to then apply them into your life and see whether or not you're inspired to tell your story.
Thank you. I think there's an incredible power that emerges through storytelling. And it's usually the path of the greatest discoveries, because once we get to the soul and the depth of our story and we're willing to stand up and share it, is when things start to transform. Mm-hmm. And so when we sit down to write, and many people talk about journaling, many people talk about these different things, but I find that the mere act of putting pen to paper or tapping the keys, that act in and of itself, it makes us use a different part of our brain. It makes us really kind of tap into what words do we really want to say? But then when you think, I think how many of us, you even mentioned it this morning, I have a book in me. Mm-hmm. We know we do. Why? Because there's something speaking to us that we need to share our stories. But what transforms when we start putting the thoughts on paper and we really start to try to convey is that we ourselves begin to see a whole new perspective on the very stories that we played over and over and over again in our heads. And so the heart of our story is our true superpower. I find that many of the authors that I serve, it's the very darkest of those times that has led them to the work they do in the world today. And that's the beauty of it. And one of the things, I have been invited to so many writing groups where especially groups of women, are actually weaving a story and talking about their story of what transpired in their world, what happened to them. And yet the common thread of of those writing groups is, why would anybody want to hear my story?
Mm-hmm.
Why should I why should I share my story? And I say, who are you not to share your story?
Mm.
Because it's by our standing up and having the strength and the courage to raw it vulnerably, not a poor me, pity me, I woe is me type of a story, but of a story that explains what happens, but also talks about your journey to figuring out yourself and what you're now doing in the world. And the very fact that you were inspired to write means that you are meant to share.
That's
And
powerful.
Because if we really truly think about it, if it's not meant to be, we would not be having these thoughts. We would not come to that point. But what I find, and I think this is what as I teach these thoughts, is that these 4 pillars of a story well told is foundational pillars that if, as we are writing, we fall into that, why would anyone want to hear my story? If we realize that we began by the words of our story, by the message that we're conveying, we can become an advocate. That's one of the first pillars. We can become an advocate for those that maybe thought they were all alone. By sharing our stories, we speak for those who yet do not have a voice. And they think they're all alone. So we begin to fill a position. And I think for those of us that kind of fall into that, why would anybody want to hear my story? When we begin to realize the deeper impact that is transpiring by sharing our stories, realizing, number 1, we can become an advocate. Number 2, we're a truth teller. When we put the light of truth out to the world, it can be scary as can be initially, but when we share the truth of what went on in our life, you would be amazed at how many more had to live through the very same truth of that, but had no idea anybody else had gone through that. So if you start to build and can keep these thoughts in your mind as you are writing, it begins to transform you too, because it's a bigger role. And so asking the questions, how would telling your story move you and inspire others? How would it move you? How would it move others? And how would it inspire others? And what could your sharing your story, number 1, do for yourself? Because there's something that breaks you free from that journey to being whole and well. In that having the courage to share, it also sets you free. And how can you break free from the resistance to telling the story? In what ways can you bless others by sharing your stories? Who needs to hear your story? And so you would think of a bigger picture. It isn't the basic things that we think about. It's the deeper part of it that can keep us actually being authentic and real and vibrant and whole as we begin to share our stories. And then we show the way. We become a way shower. We show that there's a whole different way of viewing things in life, a whole different fresh perspective that maybe we could never see because we've been so immersed with our nose down, our head down in the pain that we never actually realized what a whole brand new world there could be out there because you're not alone. So, and here's a fresh new way to look at that. Here's a fresh new perspective. This is how I can lead in the world. But a lot of us don't think of those things when we're in the midst of stuff that is heartbreaking. And then oftentimes by the sharing of your story, you unite others as we shine the light of truth onto these other things, we show others. And I was able to start a couple of really powerful groups, just like with some of the Silver Sisters.
Mhm.
We've come together, and now we're doing a lot of cool things together.
Mhm.
We're supporting each other. We're doing really, truly wonderful things. And none of it, by far, the majority of us have never met each other before.
Mhm.
And look, I'm on your show today as a result. It's these little things, you never know the ripple effects that it's going to have. Because as we begin to share our sacred gifts, because I feel that every human alive has treasured sacred gifts the world's just waiting to experience.
Mhm.
What better way for them to start hearing about it and knowing about it is either speaking it out to one another by writing those words in the form of a book, even starting with a blog, starting with anywhere, wherever you are and going. But I find that when we are willing to do that, we start to grow in a different way. And when we are knowing that we're making a difference, that in itself really transforms us inside as well. And like with the beauty of what you're doing for this show, if one person hears an important message like that, what a difference that can make. You know, you never know. You've done this show for how long? You've done
Half a
this,
year. Yeah.
yeah,
9 months. Yeah.
yeah. You never know what your words, what you've shared, how it's impacting somebody else. You may never know, and that
And that's
doesn't
very
matter.
true.
But
That's
it
very
is
true.
your legacy. It is what you've created. It's a beautiful legacy
Mhm.
by sharing our story, we're leaving a legacy. Because, I had a talk to give and I needed to do some research about storytelling. And as I was doing my research, I found that there are many, many organizations that are out there that are teaching children how important storytelling is. And um, they're even starting major groups on getting adults, the parents of these children, to start talking and sharing their stories, because that's how we pave the way for
That's right.
greatness. And if I don't talk about my story and what happened, and somebody else has no idea and they're all alone fighting the same kind of battle, who am I?
That's very true.
Who am I?
That's very, very true.
And it's to me, it's those ripple effects. It's the ripple effects of kindness. It's the ripple effects of incredible sharing. It's the ripple effects of being open and vulnerable, and not being so proud that we can't share our story, but being strong enough to share a story of, this is where I was, this is where I am now, because I had the courage to share my story.
Mhm.
And it impacted somebody, and I'll never know how many it impacted. Just like in the wisdom of the Silver Sisters, we'll never know the full impact of that. That's not what it's about. What it's about is that we are impacting lives, and we may never know the full ramifications of
Very
the
true.
beauty of it, but the fact is that we did it.
That's very true. That is very, very true. Very true. Well, we need to take a break, but when we come back, let's talk about that a little bit more, and then let's talk about how the world of storytelling has changed. Storytelling has changed, and how active the world of storytelling is, the influence of blogs and so on and so forth. So let's go to break and come on back. But thank you, thank you, thank you, Becky. Hi, and welcome back. Boy, you people should really jump in periodically and hear what happens on break. We get into all this heavy duty conversation. But again, in talking about, part of what we were talking about was the powerful statements that Becky was making in talking about, the art of storytelling and where the truth is and how it impacts our soul and our hearts. And our desire is, or maybe it's not even our desire, but it happens by accident that we inspire others. And that's what this show is designed to do. as well as, having been a teacher forever, and now as a coach, it's all about inspiring, and we never know where that piece is going to be. And what we talked about as well, you could read a passage 10 times and all of a sudden pick up a different book and that passage appear, but now it has different meaning because of what came before it and what comes after it. And the same thing, you could hear the same phrases or the same instructions or directions from the health and wellness side or whatever it happens to be, and all of a sudden it clicks and it speaks to you. That's the beauty of all of this. So as we look at where we are today in the current storytelling world, and Becky, I think you brought up the whole thing about blogs, and everybody who has anything to share is either doing YouTubes, which again is all about storytelling with video, with seeing something here, as well as blogs, the world of blogs, to just get those thoughts out in their reality. So where are we today? And you mentioned about kids. Let's talk about the impact of storytelling with kids today that are happier doing this than they are and they could be sitting across from a brother or sister, and mom and dad are even here, and they're still
doing this.
Yeah, they're doing this. And for those of you that are just on the podcast, what we're doing is making our thumbs move as if we're holding a device. So we all know that. And so where are we with storytelling? What's happening with us?
For a long time, I was afraid that, when you go to a restaurant, you see an entire family sitting around the dinner table at a restaurant, and not one of them are talking to each other. They're doing their
thumb.
devices.
They're doing the thumb.
Yeah. They're doing, and even in families where they're in one room apart and they're texting each other instead of speaking. I was kind of concerned, and yet there's many people that are seeing that happen and are taking action, which I find to be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to tell a little story right now.
There's storytelling in action from the pro.
The author that's launching, this is 7 and 8 of a book series, and it's called Positivity, Kids More Sugar. But sugar means something totally different than sugar, but her last name is Sugar. But what she's teaching is teaching children the power of words and how to really start watching, even small children watching the words they speak about themselves and about their lives. And it was fascinating, this conversation we just had just before this show, because those 2 of her books are launching. And she has a whole movement where once a month she gets kids to get on a Zoom call that goes live. And they talk about, and she said their age ranges are quite varied, to talk about one good thing that happened in their world that day. And then it seems, she says, it always weaves into some kind of a story. And even these children are telling stories about things that are happening in their lives. But what I think about with this is, we, in this world that we live in, are no longer isolated. We have technology in our hands. Look what we're doing here on a Zoom call, turning it into a podcast and turning it into all these beautiful things. So like you mentioned, YouTube, we can tell stories. When I work with my authors, what do? I ask them to create a video and put it into a QR code so that they come to life speaking in the pages of their book. Why? It makes the book more interactive, and it starts connecting the heart way more than just the written word. It's the hearing of your voice. It's that conveyance, the full impact of that. I think we are living in really strange times, but we're also living in very blessed times. Mm-hmm. Because if COVID had happened 10 years ago, would we have been ready for that? Mm-mm. We have so many ways to stay connected now, so many ways for our voice to get heard, so many ways to find. I have made many friends just through from people all over the world, not just in my local community. Mm-hmm. through the technology that we have at our fingertips. And so how do I feel about storytelling for youth? I think there are people, many of us out there, that are encouraging our young people to listen to story from other adults, but also to tell their story. And when they do, when they have to convey their own story, they grow. But it makes other kids, because we know that suicide among teenagers is skyrocketing right now. But get these kids talking to each other and talking about what they're facing. Do you think that that could turn the tide? It does turn the tide. So it's not just for us adults, it is for the children of today's world to realize they're not alone. Because, I have grandchildren right now, they're out of school again because of a COVID outbreak. And mama's got to work. She's a single mom. What are these kids doing home by themselves all the time? It's amazing. So, those are lots to think about in that whole perspective.
Right.
But I think storytelling should be taught for children. And you can start that at a very young age with having them to even draw pictures and write stories that go with it, to really, really, because that starts to pave the way for them to be able to continue themselves with storytelling.
That's true. And again, the power of telling a story through picture, and a picture's 1,000 words and whatever else you want to look at. But you also look at the languaging that we're using, and we're looking at search engine optimization, which is all about words, and looking for taglines or tags that you want in there as far as topics. And so we are very, very geared. As long as we continue to speak in complete sentences. That's the other piece.
Well, that's the other piece.
Yeah, the other piece is speaking in complete sentences, or just in the world of emojis. And again, that's just been interesting also to do. So storytelling can come in a lot of different ways. But I'm happy to hear that you are enthusiastic or are inspired by the fact that you think the kids of today will continue with the art of storytelling, versus just switching on to a device, or even using that device in a way that can help and support them. And also, and even just recording their own voices and listening back. So there are a lot of ways, but the kids need to have the guidance, I think, to understand that there are all these different options for them, versus just this one means. And what is their picture in their brain of truth telling, etc. So that opens up that other whole arena. What's their perspective? Did they get in trouble for telling the truth? So that could open up a whole other world. But again, that storytelling is important, and being able to figure out, is it real, or is it just a perceived view of something? And that could be interesting too. But that's great.
Pretty fascinating. And this lady that with her 2 books coming out, she said she's worked corporate America for a very long time and was always busy, but her heart was with raising kids up. Her kids are grown, but still raising, and her characters are named after her mom and dad, and
cool.
And they're talking about science experiments and about playing in sports and starting a new business as a kid and all these little things. But she said there's no superheroes in my stories. She said it's kids being disappointed that their science experiment didn't get an award. It's
wow.
A little girl coming to deciding she's going to make birdhouses and go sell those birdhouses. It's a little girl, a little boy figuring out, well, I just got trouble today with my parents because I said something that I shouldn't have, and how he processes that, and what she's doing. And her big goal is make it like a cartoon for kids. She's making color books for kids because there's the story that's woven through there. There's and she has this monthly podcasts for the kids that she invites them onto her show, and she wears crazy hats and has horns and noisemakers and things like that, because those are the things kids enjoy. So we need to meet those children where they are,
Yeah.
and inspire them to write those stories, whether find what they love and meet them there.
Yeah.
And that's how we're going to inspire them to become the adults that will lead our world.
That's right.
And unless and until we're willing to share our own stories with them and help them to understand who we are, then what are we doing? What are we doing in this world if we're not
That's right. That's
leading by example ourselves as adults?
That's right. That's right. Well, let's go to a break, and then we're going to come back for our last segment. And in our last segment, let's have Becky help guide us as far as how to prompt us to keep moving forward. And we're going to talk about the wonderful opportunities she's providing as part of this show, the gifts that she has for us. So let's go to break and come right back. I'm Joan Marlowe, and this is Awareness to Action. So Becky has been sharing a ton of awareness to us, and hopefully the lights are popping on and off and on and off and on and off in your brain as far as looking at yourself in the mirror, and first of all saying, I am enough, because those are vital, vital words, because you are, and taking a new perspective on how your story might influence others, or even aid you in your healing to keep moving forward, and maybe attract those people that you need in your life to help you. Because as Becky said, I mean, in this, and especially in this world of social media, etc., we can find all kinds of folks out there to support us in many, many different ways. And again, that's part of the process. Even in experience, the book launch that we went through was this whole media campaign that's part of it. And Becky, you've mentioned that a couple of times in here. So if we're looking at, we're going to approach this in a couple of ways. First of all, let's look at the wonderful gifts that you are offering listeners today. And the links will be included in show notes. And because anybody can opt in and download these. So what do you have to offer?
I have the 4 pillars, which we talked about the 4 pillars. And so that goes into a little more in depth about what those four pillars are and what I mean by that. And then the other one is how to become an impactful influencer. And there's some really strong, beautiful tips in there, because I think that, we know that we want to make a difference. I think everybody inherently, every human alive inherently wants to make a difference for somebody else. It just wants to, be there. So what are the things that you can do to be an impactful influencer? And number 1, never stop learning.
Oh, goodness. Speaking to the microphone on that one, you are speaking to the microphone. That is oh so true. Yes, never stop learning.
And by that, I mean, if you want to improve on any area of your life, what books are you reading? Who are you listening to? What kind of podcasts are you listening to? Who are you paying attention to on social media? Okay. And once you do find these books, once you do find those people on social media, those listening to those podcasts, reach out to them. Start rubbing shoulders the best ways that you can with people of like mind. Because what it does is if you become active on social media and sharing your personal story, one of the things I do with my authors is have them read little excerpts of their book well before it's published on their social media pages. Read it in a live environment, because this starts paving the way for their voice to be heard. But it also strikes the interest of others, where they're hearing you say something very interesting. They want to learn more about what you're doing. And then if they see you reference, well, I listened to Joan Marlowe today. I listened to, who are you listening to? Who are you paying attention? What that does to their perception is that person knows what they're talking about, because look who they're following. Look who they're quoting.
Mhm.
Look who they're, these are really important things. We don't think that it's that important, but just as with whatever food we eat impacts the health of our body, also the things we read, the way we speak, the people we associate with, whether they are in person or through an online acquaintance, those are some of the major things that are going to make a difference. Becoming an impactful influencer, not being afraid to share your story in your social media. Start a group, start a page, and then start a group that goes even deeper. Share your insights. You would be amazed at the number of people that tap into that. And that's what they need. That's exactly what they need. That's where they are. And here, all of a sudden, there's some kind of support and there's storytelling, doing what we're doing today. This is important, very important, because we're tapping into a beautiful resource that maybe we would have never had any other way before.
Right. And again, I mean, so we'll have the links in the show notes for you to take advantage of this, and that's pretty amazing. And all those things, there's just so much that can be said about it. So Becky, can you share with the audience what your website is and what your email address is?
Okay, so my website is spotlightpublishing.pro, P-R-O. My email is becky@spotlightpublishing.pro. From my website, you can find a calendar if you want to book a time to talk about this storytelling. More than welcome to do that. You can opt in. I have a couple of other new items that I've been working on that people can opt in. It usually pops up on the screen. And I do an author discovery session with people that are considering writing. And the biggest thing is, if this is speaking to your heart, carve out some beautiful time for yourself and set some time, dedicate some time to make your environment beautiful, whether it's playing music or burning incense or whatever, and have a quiet time and set aside a half an hour a day or 1 hour a week to start your writing. And see what transpires. Then read your story aloud to somebody that you know, love, and trust, that you know that will be there for you. This is the way you get started. Share. Form a little group of others that are writing. These are amazing ways to get over that fear and that feeling of, my story's not good enough for somebody else, because your story is good enough for somebody else to hear. And you would be amazed to find a circle of friends that would give you their feedback. And you will be truly amazed at what transpires from that.
Very true. Well, Becky, thank you so much for being with us today. And might I mention one last time, the book that helped launch this relationship is the book that I was one of the collaborating authors, and I'm honored to be in this group. It's called Wisdom of the Silver Sisters, and this too is available on Amazon. And it's in Kindle format, it's in hard copy, it's in paperback and whatever. And these little 45 stories are pretty powerful. I found myself in an emergency room a couple of weeks ago, and I happened to have this in the car with me. This is what calmed me down while I was waiting for my turn for my x-rays and whatever else, because the stories just spoke. And again, your story can do the same thing, definitely.
I shared that book with my mom and my brother. Both of them are reading it right now.
Oh, I've got dozens of people that are reading, and it's just so inspiring. So Becky, thank you. Namaste, my friend.
And to you.
And I bow to you. And this has been amazing. And thank you. And listening audience, please, if you love to tell your stories, continue to tell your stories and share that legacy. If you've got that story within and you're ready to burst it out, please think about that as well. Thank you again for joining Awareness to Action. I'm Joan Marlowe, and you can find me at joan@peacefullyhealing.com. Till next time, namaste. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining this Awareness to Action episode. Join me next time for more inspiring stories that will shift your perspective and allow you to see pathways toward a more fulfilling life. It doesn't come overnight, but with a positive outlook and a will to keep moving forward, you will get there, and it will be worth every twist and turn along the way. A willingness to learn from this experience is key. If plan A doesn't work, remember, you have plans B through Z to continue your journey. With each adjustment, you're one step closer to turning a possibility into a reality. For more information about me or to work with me personally, visit peacefullyhealing.com.